Changing weight classes can sometimes provide a major boost to a fighter's career, especially those who have fallen on hard times. But moving up or down a division isn't a guarantee to solve your problems. Now, without further ado, and ranked in no particular order, let's take a look at 10 fighters who instantly lost after changing weight classes. Number 10. Cody Garbrandt, flyweight. To kick things off, we're going to take a look at a fighter who managed to shoot himself in the foot ahead of UFC 269. Sure, Cody Garbrandt's legacy is undoubtedly set in stone after winning the bantamweight title with a stellar performance against Dominic Cruz, but in the 3 fights that followed, he found himself on a streak of knockout defeats. At that point, it was clear he needed to go back to the drawing board. But after a decision loss to Rob Font, for some reason, Garbrandt decided that a move down in weight would give him a chance to revitalize his career. But undergoing a tough weight cut is going to have some ramifications. And sure enough, upon reaching flyweight, Cody's chin was once again cracked, this time by Kai Kara France. In the end, the change in weight class did not work in his favor. Number 9. TJ Dillashaw, flyweight. Oddly enough, just a couple of years before Garbrandt's trip to 125 pounds, his old teammate TJ Dillashaw attempted to do the exact same thing. And it's probably fair to say that his flyweight debut was even worse. Not only did he struggle to make the weight and use the banned substance EPO to help him in his fight camp, but he then got TKO'd by the divisional champion Henry Cejudo in one of the opening exchanges. Then, when USADA flagged him for his EPO usage, TJ was stripped of his original title. So to summarize, Dillashaw won the bantamweight belt and then decided to try his hand at double champion status. But instead of becoming a 2-weight world champion, he was left with no belts and a 2-year ban. Number 8. Conor McGregor, welterweight. Conor McGregor was on top of the world at the start of 2016. As the newly crowned featherweight champion, thanks to a 13-second knockout of Jose Aldo, Conor was given the opportunity to challenge Rafael dos Anjos for his lightweight belt. But of course, the fight never materialized, and instead of going up to 155 pounds, McGregor jumped all the way up to welterweight, making his divisional debut against Nate Diaz, a short-notice replacement that wasn't really expected to serve as a major threat. Unfortunately for Conor, he didn't realize just how durable the larger fighters could be, and his overconfidence in his power would prove to be his downfall. After Nate was able to weather the early storm, he came on strong in the second round and submitted the featherweight champion with a rear naked choke. A life-changing victory for Nathan Diaz and a harsh lesson for Conor McGregor. Number 7. Luke Rockhold, light heavyweight. The whole idea of moving up in weight for endurance reasons is a double-edged sword. Sure, you might benefit from not having to lose as many pounds during fight week, and there's enough evidence out there to suggest that your chin can really benefit from that. But the guys in the heavier weight classes also hit harder, so there's that to keep in mind. And Luke Rockhold was given a major reality check when he tried to move up to the light heavyweight division, following a few losses at 185 pounds. And although we didn't know it at the time, his opponent, Jan Blachowicz, was in the process of unlocking his championship potential. And in the second round of their UFC 239 matchup, he caught Rockhold with a vicious left hand, producing one of the most brutal knockouts you'll ever see. Rockhold would then disappear from the sport for over 3 years before making his return to middleweight. Number 6. Chris Weidman, light heavyweight. Like Luke Rockhold, Chris Weidman at one point in time was one of the finest middleweight fighters on the planet. But like his former rival, when he did lose his title, he fell on some pretty hard times. 4 knockout losses in 5 fights were enough to make the All-American consider a divisional switch-up. But Weidman's name value saw him inserted directly into the top 10, with a matchup against Dominic Reyes set for his debut. This was the very same Dominic Reyes that would go on to give John Jones the fight of his life in his next appearance. And unfortunately, it didn't take him long to get Weidman out of there. Just 1 minute and 43 seconds into the very first round, Reyes put the former middleweight champion out cold, making it a disastrous night for this once great talent. Number 5. Kevin Lee, welterweight. Kevin Lee is a fighter who really seemed like he had championship potential. His early showing against Tony Ferguson and his brutal knockout of the highly underrated Gregor Gillespie were flashes of the greatness that the Motown phenom had. But by the time he decided to leave the lightweight division for welterweight, he was 1-2 in his last 3 and had missed weight ahead of the fight he won. Waiting for him in his new division was Rafael dos Anjos, and over the 4 rounds the fight lasted, dos Anjos turned in a veteran performance, eventually submitting Lee in the 4th round to take home the win. Even though he eventually parted ways with the UFC, we still think that Kevin Lee is definitely a great fighter, but he probably would have benefited from the creation of a new weight class. Number 4. Rashad Evans, middleweight. Rashad Evans is best known for his work in the 205-pound division, where he earned victories over stars like Michael Bisping, Chuck Liddell, Rampage Jackson, and Forrest Griffin. He also won a heavyweight season of The Ultimate Fighter to earn his UFC contract, so it's pretty fair to say that he was more than capable of competing across different divisions. But when the time came for his drop down to 185 pounds, his best years were definitely behind him. After losing back-to-back fights against Glover Teixeira and Ryan Bader in the light heavyweight division, Evans attempted to bring new life to his career by dropping down to middleweight. Unfortunately, another pair of back-to-back defeats would follow, this time in lesser competition in Daniel Kelly and Sam Alvey. By this point, it was clear that this former champion was far past his prime, and he eventually left the UFC in 2018. Number 3. Max Holloway, lightweight. By the time Max Holloway decided to move up to the lightweight division, he was quickly becoming one of the pound-for-pound best. In his last 3, he had thoroughly dominated Brian Ortega and had earned back-to-back finishes over Jose Aldo. With the interim lightweight title on the line and his old rival Dustin Poirier in front of him, the stage was set for Holloway to make a real ascent into the history books. But on fight night, his move up in weight proved to be a little too ambitious. During the bout, Poirier was a lot tougher and far more powerful than any featherweight that Max had fought. Although the fight was close, Dustin edged his way to victory, outboxing and largely overpowering the Hawaiian over 5 rounds. This was no doubt a major wake-up call for Holloway and showed the importance of physicality across weight divisions. Number 2. Anthony Johnson, middleweight. Anthony Johnson is perhaps best known for his shocking knockout power, but during his early years, he was also pretty famous for his tendency to miss weight, and often by a sizable margin. At one point, Rumble Johnson fought as a welterweight before he eventually moved up to middleweight and later light heavyweight as his waistline continued to expand. But despite signing on the dotted line for 2 middleweight bouts, he ultimately missed weight for both of them, and his UFC middleweight clash with Vitor Belfort was pretty disastrous for 2 reasons. First, it ended with him getting submitted in the opening round, but it also served as the last straw for Dana White, and he proceeded to cut Johnson from the UFC before welcoming him back several years later. Luckily, he found a new home in World Series of Fighting and found success in both the heavyweight and light heavyweight divisions. Number 1. Israel Adesanya, light heavyweight. Sometimes the timing on a divisional move just isn't right, and for a champion like Israel Adesanya, it's not hard to see another trip to 205 pounds in his future. But when he came up against Jan Blachowicz at UFC 259 and attempted to become a 2-weight world champion, the world sorely underestimated just how much difference the size would make. To his credit, Israel Adesanya had a respectable showing, but at the end of the 5 rounds, it was clear that the champion was the superior man on that night. In the end, Blachowicz would use his size and wrestling to earn a decision win, handing Adesanya his first and so far his only loss in MMA. If Adesanya can make the necessary adjustments and maybe pack on a few pounds, he could certainly be an interesting addition to the light heavyweight ranks. But this was not the case at UFC 259. As always, if you guys enjoyed the video, please be sure to let me know by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Apart from that, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.